What's up, YouTube? Today we're going to be looking at the Open Great League and a special team that I've had crafted for a little bit and I'm excited to finally use it, and that is Jellicent, Shadow Drapion, Tinkaton. Now, Tinkaton only has two weaknesses, and that is ground and fire. So what do we have on the lead? We have something that is good against ground and fire in Jellicent. Water hits both those for super effective damage, and it beats some of the most common grounds, as well as all the common fires. And then we have Shadow Drapion as our safe switch to lure out any ground types that Tinkaton doesn't want to see. So you do have a double ground weakness in the back, but Shadow Drapion is supposed to bait that out as a safe swap. Jellicent punishes, Tinkaton roams free kind of deal. And then there's the core between the lead and the closer, just very strong there. So yeah, without further ado, let's hop into some battles. Alright, in the first match we have a terrible lead in Jumpluff. Well, it's not absolutely terrible because they could just be on double flying moveset, but we have two better answers in the back, so I'm going to instantly pivot into my Drapion. Now we lure out a regular Feraligatr, and this is an okay matchup because one Hydro Cannon is not enough to KO, and these Shadow Claws, they're resisted, so they never have an ability to farm down here. So I can live one Hydro. Now I've put them in virtually Aquatail range, so I'm going to bait with an Aquatail. And my opponent does shield that up. They know they have to throw another move or else I will get to another Aquatail, so they do. And at this point I may as well full send the crunch because I'm only going to get to one more charge move. And the crunch will connect and grab that shield. So we've put our opponent at 0 shields, which is fantastic. We can soak up this energy on Jellicent, which is exactly what I'll do. I do get one turn lag when I bring in my Jellicent, which is, pretty typical. But my opponent is very cool, and they let me farm them down without throwing another Shadow Claw, so I appreciate that opponent. And then they come back in with their Jumpluff, but unfortunately for my opponent, with a Lapras in the back, we have a Tinkaton, and Tinkaton does resist these Psy Waves, and it looks like two Play Roughs, while they might not be enough to KO, they will put them in farm down range. I do have to let one go because I know they have a pacing advantage in this matchup, so I live one, and they try and throw the second on CMP, which is great that I overfarm. I will shield one up, and then I'm going to overfarm here pretty significantly. I farm up to 100 energy, and now I'm throwing the Play Rough from this range. That leaves them on 1 HP, so I instantly pivot into my Jellicent, expecting my opponent to blind click the Sparkling Aria if they had it. They do not, but they pivot at the exact same time. We are able to make it to a Shadow Ball against the Jellicent, and by the fact that they went for an Acrobatics, that tells me they're on Acrobatics and Aerial Ace. They do outpace me here, and the Jumpluff is still rather healthy, so Aerial Ace, it is still not enough to quite knock out the Jellicent, so I'm actually going to connect with the Surf before I go down, which does put it in Play Rough range. I have to watch for a catch. My opponent mistimes their catch, and we're able to take that win. Into the next match, another Jumpluff lead. You lead a water type, and this is what you get. I save switch into my Drapion, and I am instantly hard countered with a Quagsire. But this is the whole purpose of this team, right? We want to lure out a ground type so that Tinkaton doesn't have to face it, and that's exactly what we've done in this matchup. I am going to shield this up because I think if they full send the Stone Edge, then I can actually make a play for switch here, or at least grab 2 shields in the process. So that's what I'm going to try and do. I do get that shield off, and then they're 1 away from the next Stone Edge, so I just throw the Aquatail. My opponent makes a wise decision, and they let that go. So at this point, I can't flip the matchup. They would make it to 2 Aquatails before I was able to get a Poison Sting farm down. So I'm forced to let that go and just take my losses in the ones. This is okay because when they instantly pivot into Ormpeko, I realize that my opponent is ABA weak to the Tinkaton. So this is fantastic. I will shield up the first Aura Wheel because that is really hard hitting neutral damage. And now, even though they've boosted their attack, Aura Wheel Dark type is resisted. I do overfarm a little bit, connect with the Bulldoze, and it's not quite enough to KO, but my opponent just goes for a Psychic Fangs, which allows me to get the full farm down here. They come back with a Quagsire. I'm forced to throw energy here because they're 1 off the move. They shield that up, so I instantly pivot into my Jellicent, and I'm unable to catch the move because they would only make it to an Aquatail. So my opponent banks that charge move, so we have to keep that in mind for later. We are able to connect with a Shadow Ball against the Jumpluff, and it is the non-shadow, so it looks like it can actually live 2, which is pretty unfortunate here. Able to make it to a second Shadow Ball, and from this range, it'll put the Jumpluff deep into the red, but it's still not enough to KO. My opponent makes a great play. They overfarm to the max, and they leave themselves at 1 HP, so not to concede too much of a farm down, and they're still able to make it to another charge move, which is unfortunate because this little bit of chip damage might put me in Aqua Tail range. Energy Ball is resisted. In comes the snipe of the Aqua Tail. Can Tinkaton live this? It can. On 1 HP, we live the Mud Shot as well, and somehow, someway, we're able to take that win off of the bulk of Tinkaton. Great lead in the next match. We've got Jellicent into a Dugong. Now, this is fantastic because we pace equally, but we win CMP in this matchup. So we can always, and we have neutral fast move, whereas theirs is resisted. And drill runs are non-stab, whereas Shadow Ball is stab. So they do shield up the first move, maybe trying to bait me into shielding an Icy Wind, but they do end up full sending the drill run. I am able to make it to the Shadow Ball on what would be CMP tie with their next drill run, but my opponent does decide to overfarm, and that's okay because I can live 2 drill runs here, and 2 drill runs are not enough to KO. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to farm up to when they would make it to their next drill run, throw the Shadow Ball, and Shadow Ball from this range will most certainly be able to connect, and now we've won in that matchup while not using any shields. They switch into a Jellicent, and I do not want to get Hex farm down, so I instantly pivot into my Drapion, and the opponent connects with a Surf. They then switch into a Shadow Alolan Sandslash. I'm able to connect with a Crunch, and my opponent leaves that shield for their back Pokemon potentially, because I'm going to go for a second Crunch, and yeah, they just completely sacrifice their Sandslash. I'm hoping my opponent doesn't know where my energy is at this point, so I just instantly go for the Aqua Tail. They do not. They end up shielding that up. Can I make it to a Crunch? I cannot, and unfortunately I do go down with energy, but I still have my Jellicent for a catch, so I'm going to throw 1 Fairy Wind, go for the catch. Did we catch the Shadow Ball? No, it was just a Surf, but that's okay. We still have 2 shields remaining, and even though my opponent has an energy lead, there is no way they can win this matchup. They're probably in 1 Play Rough plus Bulldoze range, so I am just going to go for the Play Rough, see how much that does, see if I need 2 Play Roughs or if I can just go for the Bulldoze after this. And we did correctly shield a Shadow Ball, so now just going to go for the Bulldoze. Looks like that was on the CMP tie, and Bulldoze from this range is enough to KO the Jellicent, and we're able to take that win. Okay, into the next match, we've got Jellicent into Sableye. This is another tough lead, but we have 2 answers to Dark in the back, so we're going to instantly pivot into our Drapion. The opponent ends up staying in with their Sableye, so all I want to do here is connect with the Shadow Crunch, and at this point I have a decision to make. Are they full sending or are they baiting? I call the bait, and it is the bait, which is absolutely huge. Then they come in with a Typhlosion, so we have officially lured out a fire type that Tinkaton does not want to see, and we're able to grab a shield from my opponent, and we get to another Aqua Tail. Now the opponent can live this, however they end up committing both shields in this matchup because they know that Thunder Punches will go pretty far against this Jellicent because our Jellicent is energy dry. However, I can survive 1, so I will let 1 go. But it's about whether I want to live 2, and I decide I need to get rid of this Typhlosion, so I will shield up another, and then they instantly pivot back into their Sableye, and at this point, I can just go for the full farm down. Everything the Sableye can learn here is resisted. Dazzling Gleam does connect. It does abysmal damage to the Tinkaton. They come back in with this Typhlosion. I will go for 1 in the move, so that if Bulldoze does KO, which I'm hoping it does, I will not take this Incinerate damage, but unfortunately it doesn't. However, that does allow me to get a nice farm down, and what do they have in the back but a Credilli? Credilli, while I do not have Heavy Slam here, will be hit by neutral Play Roughs, and I can actually live another charge move here, so I'm actually going to let this go. Rock Tomb does connect. I'm going to farm up, bank the charge move, and then switch into my Jellicent so that this game is immediately over, because now all I have to do is connect with another charge move, and I win this game. My opponent is still playing it out. They do end up connecting with a Grass Knot, but I have the Play Rough banked. I can 0 bubble this, and from this range it will most certainly KO the Credilli, and we're able to take that win. Into the next match, we got Jellicent into Malamar. Now, Malamar is a bit of a tough lead, but we have 2 answers to Dark in the back, so we're going to instantly pivot into our Drapion, and we lure out a Corviknight. Now, this might seem like a terrible matchup because our charge moves are only neutral, and our Poison Stings are double resisted, but we have a huge pacing advantage in this matchup. Corviknight is just too slow to the charge moves, and while these sand attacks are adding up, we're able to connect with 2 crunches before my opponent throws their energy, and they let that go. So you know what? Now I'm going to make a play for switch. I know I can get to an Aqua Tail before they get to their next charge move, so I will throw this charge move in order to get the knockout, but my opponent shields. So clearly they want alignment in this matchup. I'm playing for switch at this point. I need the farm down. And if I'm able to get this double resisted farm down, which I am, I will come out loaded with energy as well. I'm going to farm up, go for the crunch. This will do big damage against the Malamar as well. So Drapion putting in so much work in this matchup already. They then pivot into a Typhlosion, and I can now respond with my Jellicent. They do overfarm pretty spectacularly here. And by spectacularly, I mean by 1 Incinerate. However, that is half of the energy they need to get to Thunder Punches. And at this point, they're at back-to-back Thunder Punches. So I'm forced to just kind of let this go. Jellicent actually lives that, so I click the move, but my opponent, aware of where my energy was at, also clicks the move. And now we're in a bit of a difficult situation. Because this Typhlosion, while it has no energy, has a lot of super effective damage against my Tinkaton. I instantly come back into my Drapion. I need to live this charge move. It is just the foul play. I bank the Aqua Tail for later, and now I'm just going to commit to a near farm down. I throw when I'm 2 Fairy Winds away from the next Bulldoze, so that way if they come back in with the Typhlosion, I can throw 2 Fairy Winds and the super effective charge move, but my opponent realizes they no longer have a win con, so they resign the match. A 3rd jump level lead. Crazy. Jump fluffs are out, and I'm telling you, all the non-shadows for some reason. But this opponent is actually going to stay in and chip with an Aerial Ace before they pivot into their next Pokemon, and that Pokemon is Lapras, which makes sense why they wanted to chip there. Lapras has resisted Psywaves in this matchup because Psychic is double resisted on Dark and single super effective on Poison, so it net single resists on the Drapion's Poison Dark typing, and that allows me to, because they chipped with the Aerial Ace, allows me to get to 2 crunches before my opponent gets to their first charge move, which means I always will be able to outpace in this matchup, which means I am going to play for switch. I've already grabbed 2 shields from my opponent, but I can flip switch in this matchup, and I will, because Tinkaton completely walls Jump Left moveset, and Jellicent is bulky, so I can align it against whatever is in the back, no matter if it has a slight energy lead. So crunch does connect, I am able to flip switch, and it is a Corsola in the back. So this is tough, but all I have to do is make it to a Shadow Ball, and this game is over. And at this point, I am out of Shadow Ball, so I'm expecting my opponent to throw this charge move and instantly pivot. So I'm queuing up the switch, but my opponent, they end up staying in this matchup. It was either a big brain read, or they had no idea where my energy was at. But I end up pivoting in a matchup where I shouldn't, and now I am forced to stay in this matchup and take heavy hitting Astonishes and Nightshades, and it's just going to do way too much damage. It's going to put me in range for this Jump Fluff in order to get knock me out with resisted charge moves. I am able to connect with a Bulldoze, but if they are on acrobatics here, they might be able to outpace. Fortunately, I am able to get to it, play rough, and this will do some pretty sizable damage, and I have the Shadow Ball loaded, so I'm going to instantly switch into my Jellicent. Is Shadow Ball enough to KO from this range? No, they're the non-shadow. And just like that, if my opponent is at back-to-back charge moves, then this game is over. Aerial Ace KOs the Jellicent, and here comes a second charge move. I'm not sure if Aerial Ace is enough to KO from this range, but it is the Energy Ball, and Energy Ball is certainly enough. So we unfortunately do lose to that 1 jump off. That was the 1 loss I had with this team, and that was off of a complete mistake on my end. I should have stayed in to see that they were going to throw the fast move, but the game doesn't update, you know? This is another matchup where I think I made a mistake. I think you should throw Surf on alignment, and what I mean by on alignment is as soon as you get there, because otherwise you can get a Scorching Sands debuff by allowing them to outpace, which doesn't seem to make too much of a difference in this matchup, because I think it's going to take 3 Surfs to KO either way, but my opponent ends up throwing on alignment, maybe unaware about where my energy was at. They're able to connect with a second Scorching Sands, but here comes, what is this, a 4th Surf or something, or a 3rd Surf, and Surf is enough to pick up the knockout. They have a Wiggly in the back, so I'm going to safe switch into my Drapion, and we lure out a Toxapex. Now the reason I switched into my Drapion when my Jellicent was that low is because I had a feeling Toxapex was in the back, and I really wanted the Toxapex on my Drapion because this is a pretty dominant matchup for the Shadow Drapion. This is a CMP tie. I am going to shield this up just because even though I have a pacing advantage on Tinkaton, I'm not sure that one Bulldoze would have been enough to KO from this range. So I'm just going to KO with the Crunch, and my opponent has saved 2 shields for Wigglytuff. However, what my opponent doesn't know is I have a Steel type in the back, and I'm about to connect with an Aqua Tail. We actually grab a shield from my opponent, so in comes the Tinkaton. Tinkaton has an absolutely fantastic matchup here, and even though they had 2 shields in this matchup and they debuff my attack pretty instantly, I am able to go for a Play Rough, and Play Rough from this range will put them deep into the red, which is nice. They no shield that, maybe potentially going for calling a Bulldoze debuff or understanding that this game is over. My opponent lets the Bulldoze go through, so yeah, they're just conceding the match, and we are able to take that win. Into the next match, Goodra on the lead. This is a bit of a rough lead. Obviously, Surf is resisted and they have super effective Thunder Punch, so I instantly pivot into my safe swap here, and I am going to go for a Crunch. Crunch will do pretty massive damage to the Goodra, but we do not get the defense drop. And at this point, I have a decision to make, and I decide I want to keep my Drapion alive. So I'm going to overfarm here. I'm going to throw the Aqua Tail right before they get to their next charge move. And Aqua Tail from this range is enough to pick up the knockout. Now it's about what my opponent has in back, and unfortunately for me, they have a Fortress, and Fortress is a huge core breaker for this team. It is a Steel type that resists the Play Rough, and it has super effective Volt switches on our Jellicent. Now I have a decision to make here, and I decide to come in with Jellicent, and that might seem a bit weird because they have super effective Volt switches. However, I do not want to take a super effective Earthquake onto my Tinkaton. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to overfarm. I'm going to let them connect with 2 Rock Tombs, debuff my attack, then I'm going to instantly pivot into my Tinkaton. Because that allows me to reset that debuff, bank all of that energy, and now they were energy dry when I switch into my Tinkaton. I am able to connect with a Bulldoze that gets the defense drop. I think they're going to full send an Earthquake here, and they do, which is massive. I get that shield call correct, but now I have no shields in play, and my opponent does have an ability to make a second Earthquake here. So I'm going to throw the Bulldoze right before they get there, and they click the move instantly. So I know this is an Earthquake, but Tinkaton is really bulky. So we actually live that on 1 HP. It is a Feraligatr in the back, and because I banked that energy from earlier, here comes a Bulldoze, able to instantly pivot into our Jellicent, banked the Shadow Ball from earlier. Shadow Ball connects against the Feraligatr, and now it's a pacing game, and Jellicent has the advantage, able to Hex and make it to a Surf before they're able to get to another charge move because Fortress is slow to the charge moves, and somehow we're able to take the win against a core breaker. Pretty good lead. In the next match, we've got Jellicent into a Carbank. Now we have super effective Surfs here, so what we're going to do is we're going to overfarm, go for the Surf, and my opponent makes a really nice catch onto Gliscod where it is resisted. However, even though they sneak 1 Shadow Claw in for free, I have a pretty dominant matchup with Shadow Drapion here because that Surf connects. Now 1 Crunch is enough to knock out the Gliscod. So what I'm going to do is overfarm here pretty significantly, go for the Crunch right before they make it to their next charge move, and this Crunch will be enough to pick up the knockout unless my opponent commits a shield, and they do commit a shield, but I am not letting them flip switch here. Their Shadow Claws are resisted. They have no way of flipping switch in this matchup. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to overfarm. I now am going to go for the Aqua Tail right before they make it to their next charge move, but my opponent actually catches that onto their Carbank, which is fine because now we can come in with our Tinkaton, and Tinkaton has an extremely dominant matchup here. We should be able to go for a Bulldoze plus a Play Rough, and that should be able to pick up the knockout. So going for the Bulldoze first, maybe we get that defense drop, and we do, and now able to make it to a Play Rough, and Play Rough from this range is enough to pick up the knockout. And now what is in the back? They do not want to show me. They're going to come in with their Gliscod first. They are going to connect with an X Scissor, for some reason throwing the resisted charge move, and they're in perfect Fairy Wind farm down range for my Tinkaton, and my opponent does not want to see what's in the back, so they just resigned the match. Great lead in the next match. Into the final match of the video, Jellicent into Talonflame. They safe switch into a Drapion, and we have a great response in Tinkaton. My opponent is over farming pretty massively here, so I'm just going to connect with a Bulldoze because it takes 2 Bulldozes to KO a Drapion, and we get the defense drop, which is massive. I know they have an ability to outpace me here to 2 charge moves, unless my opponent is on Crunch and Sludge Bomb, which is really unfortunate for my opponent. Definitely not the moveset you want to be on in this meta. Aquatail is just so strong and so spammy, but that actually allows me to overfarm pretty significantly, go for the Bulldoze to pick up the knockout because my opponent cannot flip this matchup, and now I'm instantly pivoting into my Drapion. And the reason I do that is because I have super effective Aquatail coverage for the Talonflame, and I do not want to concede a farm down. So I instantly pivot, and I actually lure out the Morpeko. And this is absolutely perfect for me because all I have to do is grab both shields from my opponent, and this game is over. The water bubbles were taking their time to get there, but they do finally show up. And now that we've grabbed both shields from my opponent, this game is over. All I have to do is let this go, and we can just come back in with our Tinkaton, and we will be able to get to a Bulldoze. They do end up switching back into their Talonflame, so I bank that energy. I then come in with my Jellicent. I can live any charge move except for a Brave Bird. I might even be able to live a Brave Bird. So I'm going to let this go because if they Brave Bird, they're going to lower the defense and put themselves in Fairy Wind farm down range. But they do not, so I'm able to get a Hex farm down. And now I'm come out loaded with energy, so my opponent just resigns the match. But yeah, that's the team that I've been super excited to showcase for a while. I believe in my top teams video, I showcased this as one of the teams, but with Drifblim on the lead. And while Drifblim does make sense for this team because it's weak to dark as well, and it actually resists the ground type coverage, which both of your Pokemon are weak to in the back, I found that it just had too many weaknesses and didn't have the bulk to carry this team. And I felt like I really wanted to use my shields on Shadow Drapion. And you can tell in these matchups, that's the game plan that I stuck to. Jellicent and Tinkaton, they're more or less sponges on this team. Drapion is just fighting for alignment, and that's all it is, or grabbing shields. That's what that Pokemon can do. And the other 2 Pokemon just have good coverage into the meta. So yeah, that's going to be it for me from this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, peace.